Welcome to Ohio VolleyTalk. Alongside me here, Snawson, I'm Elliot Scully. Joining us today, the head coach of the Mount Vernon Yellow Jackets. Although they wear orange and their whole logo is orange. I looked it up; it's a copyright issue. But head coach of Mount Vernon, Chad Sivewright. How you doing, Chad?
Good, good. Thanks for having me. I really like what you guys are doing, and I'm super excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you on. So you guys so far 4-4, but with four really competitive losses. You've lost to Moeller's number one, sorry, Moeller's number two, X number one, Liberty's number four, and then you lost to number seven Derby, and you didn't even have your setter then, but it was still a really competitive match. I think from my count, you have the most competitive schedule so far. Obviously, Moeller and X have the disadvantage of not being able to play themselves, but you're the only one who's played them both so far. And you've beaten St. Vincent St. Mary and DeSales, who are some of the two top teams in D2. So I really like how you schedule very competitively.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've been able to do because we have the we don't have a conference schedule, so it's completely open, and started just getting in touch with these coaches. Like when I first started coaching, and it's really worked out. I mean, they really enjoy coming up and getting a mix of different teams playing, and so yeah, it's been really good for us for sure.
Yeah. So looking back at last year in 2021, you lost the Liberty in the regional final in four. This was something that I personally was wondering for a while. Liberty was the one seed, and it kind of seemed like everyone would go down to the lower bracket. Why did you guys choose to go after them?
I think it was that we had played them during the season, and felt like we had a plan, from tape going over film, and I just like that. I think what was I really forget what was the other option if we had made it there. It would have been Jerome. Is that right, or was it Thomas Worthington? I don't remember.
It was, yeah, us, Thomas Worthington, and Jerome in the other regional final.
Yeah, so I guess maybe at the time I was thinking that Thomas Worthington would get there, and we didn't, we hadn't played them, which was also including you, correct?
Yeah.
We hadn't played you guys except for at this scrimmage.
We didn't have both ends, so it's totally different team.
Yeah. So it's just kind of the uncertainty, and we had played Liberty in regular season. I mean, we didn't do well against them that regular season match, but I felt we had grown a lot, and again, knew what, I guess, more of what to expect just because we had played them. So I felt like we just matched better, just with knowing. So that was really it. That was really the game plan. So it wasn't so much a matter of. I mean, I think both teams were going to be tough, really. So it wasn't like I thought that they were going to be easier or anything like that. I just felt like we had a better plan going into it. So yeah.
Now, Mount Vernon's in an interesting location in the sense that it's in the central region, but it's a little bit away from the Columbus area. So how does this geographical barrier affect your scheduling?
Well, yeah, I don't, it's interesting that we are about an hour away from the Columbus teams. And that's a little bit of a trip for them too. I don't know that it, actually, I don't think that it really comes into play. My scheduling has been kind of, it hasn't really changed up the last few years. So we get a lot of the same teams, on the schedule. I reach out to Moeller and St. X and Elder and try to get those guys to come up, and the North teams to come down. So it's good. I mean, Columbus is similar, where they could pull teams, for those same type of events where they can run a quad and bring teams from these different, all the different regions to come to like a central location. The nice thing about us is we just have more options because we have open schedules. So, I mean, we can do it multiple times, whereas the Columbus schools with their conference schedules might only be able to get one, maybe two quads in, where a lot of our matches are quads. So I don't know that it's actually been really a barrier. I think it kind of works out for us. So
You talked about quads, and you guys had an interesting quad last week as you played against number ones in both D1 and D2, Saint Xavier and St. Francis de Sales, respectfully. How does scheduling against these top teams from all regions prepare you for the state tournament coming up?
yeah, I mean, I think it gives our guys kind of that comfort in knowing that they've played them. So there's not an unknown, whereas if you like some Columbus schools or central region schools or maybe in every region might not have that opportunity where there's that unknown where they can maybe catch some film of other teams playing them. But there's comfort from, I think, our guys, when we get there, we get to the tournament and we start looking at like who could be ahead, we can start to say, well, we've played this team. And so it's, I think it's a great advantage. And that's kind of where I, was the reasoning and starting to schedule that way and try to get as many of these regional teams on our schedule. I think it can hurt, from an award standpoint. I feel bad sometimes for our guys because we end up not getting a whole lot of central region exposure, just a few teams. So, but statewide, I think our guys are pretty well can, be well known to these other regions. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword for a lot of things, but yeah, I mean, I think it really helps us out looking when we get to tournament time and we're looking down the road, and seeing what the path could be and say, hey, well, we have film on these teams, we've played them, we know what we need to do to get prepared. So it works out really well.
It's really cool that you guys have that opportunity. I believe you have 4 quads this year against all really competitive teams. And it's cool that a Mount Vernon quad is something that teams want to be able to go to and experience. So looking at your schedule, something that interested me, you play Licking Heights like a league opponent. You play them once at home and once away. You won the first one away, called the Battle of the Bees, which I thought was cool because they're the Hornets and you're the Yellow Jackets. You won that one in 4. But what was the reasoning behind playing them twice?
Well, so interesting. So we're actually, I'm pretty sure I can say this. I don't really. So our school is actually moving to the Licking Valley League. So we will end up actually having, and Licking Heights is in that. So we will actually now kind of become part of a conference, I suppose, since we'll both have, boys volleyball programs in the Licking Valley League now. So they actually, I think through this transition, it's going to take place in 2024, I think, is when our school actually transfers over. Their AD reached out to our AD, and so it was kind of set up. I do most of our scheduling, but they reached out to our AD, and I had a few spots that I needed to fill, and I really like where they they've come a long ways. I think like that. I really like what their coach is doing there. They've got a good amount of club guys now too. So we did play them. I think when my first year of coaching in 2017, and they've just come a really long way. So I think it's great. It's awesome that they're right there, and I kind of like this. This Battle of the Bees thing, kind of like a rivalry thing going. So it's super cool, and it just worked out. So I'm hoping that we keep it going, and obviously when it becomes a conference thing, that we'll be able to have that, and hopefully with the two of us, having programs, other teams in this, other schools in this Licking Valley League will pick it up, and it can grow. I mean, that's the whole point of this. So. Yeah, it's super cool. I'm really excited about being able to play them for sure.
Well, here's the thing. I've called a few of your games when I was at St. X, and a couple of years ago you played the Bombers, and it was a little rough for you guys as the Bombers ended up giving you a good taste there. But afterwards, when you came back in 2022, it was a better squad. And then especially this year, Elliot and I both have you at number 5 in the state. We've seen this growth, especially over the past couple of years in this entire program. Talk to me about it and what it means for you.
Yeah, sure. That year, the year you're talking about, the 2021 year, yeah, that was a tough year. Those were the I mean, I'm sure for everyone, but especially hit us pretty hard. That team had zero varsity experience. They all were, a lot of them were sophomores that year who lost their freshman year because it was the COVID year. So basically they were playing that year, coming straight out of middle school onto the varsity court with the schedule that we had. I mean, playing like St. X and, I think we had Moeller and Elder on the schedule that, I mean, they were just, cutting their, I mean, it was like thrown into the deep end, try to learn how to swim. I mean, like, but, a lot of credit to our guys, that toughed that out. I mean, it was a 1-win season. We won 1 game in the tournament, and turned around and made it last year to the regional final with with that team. So, they just really wanted it. I mean, so much credit to them for coming back after that and like just getting after it. We had a lot of club exposure after that. Guys just really wanted to get better. So yeah, I mean, they just went after it. And then this past year, coming into this year, we had more club guys. I mean, I can't say enough about that. I mean, there's just something you're going to get when you are playing all year round and you're getting extra coaching and and yeah, I think it was just keeping our guys. A lot of them saw that the 2019 team that made it to the Final Four and they wanted that, and a couple of like 1 or 2 guys who were freshmen on the bench during that time, and they kind of led the way, and each year they just kept after it and kept saying like, we can do it. We can get back to that. It's just, we just got to keep after it and work. And that's what they've done. So, yeah, I mean, so much credit after that year. That year was tough. That year was tough. I wasn't used to, being in that position and, having to try to motivate after losing a lot of games, but they kept after it. I mean, they knew that it was just experience. It was just, they needed more experience, and they just kept grinding. And so I'm really happy with that class and what they've done as leaders for these younger guys. And I mean, now we've got guys who are sophomores who could be on varsity, be varsity level players on a lot of teams in the state. So it's great. It's great to see like what they've done and how they've persevered through that.
Let's go recap this quad. And Elliot and I were talking about this beforehand. Of course, the first game you play was against St. X, you lose in 3. The next one was against St. Francis de Sales, you won in 4. The last one against St. Edward's was postponed because of a power outage. Can you just tell me what exactly happened there?
Yeah, it was just, I mean, we lost power. We were on our, I mean, I guess it was kind of good timing because we were all on our break between our second and third matches, and power just went out at the school and in the area, and we just got word while we were there that it was going to be a couple hours, so we just decided that we would just let it go for that day. Neil Corrigan at St. Ed's, I talked to him about possibly trying to get it back on the schedule because I'd really like to play them. So we're going to see if we can still get that in there, but I don't know. Yeah, it was unfortunate. I mean, it's good that we got most of the matches in, but yeah, it's just weather. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, we had some high winds and it just knocked the power out. So yeah, it was kind of a freak thing, but that's all that happened. So
looking forward, you've got St. Ed's at some point, maybe. Walsh is this Saturday. You got a quad next Saturday with Berlin, Centerville, and Hudson. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that quad. That'll be very interesting. I'd like to see how you play Berlin and how good is Hudson. That's some stuff I want to know. Is there anything that you've heard around the state that you're game planning for those teams?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely start. We've got like you said, we've got Walsh this Saturday, so it's kind of weird, like a lot of time between these matches. So we're just kind of trying to manage things. I mean, to be honest, we are dealing with a little bit of injury and sickness this week, so we're trying to manage that. So really, I'm just going kind of one day at a time. I haven't really looked at like that far ahead. I know that one's. I mean, that one's going to be tough. The one after that has St. Ignatius, Beaver Creek, and who else is at that one? I forget. Oh, I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, so I'm just trying to go one day at a time and just manage our, what we've got going on with our guys and just trying to stay healthy. I mean, so I mean that one's going to be tough. I mean, Berlin looks like they're playing really well, and Centerville. I mean, yeah. So Hudson, I'm interested to see. I mean, last I saw they were 6-0. That's awesome. But I'm interested to see what they do against Ignatius this week. And just and see where exactly they're at. I know that they brought a lot of guys back. So and they did really well. I mean, we played them last year and they were tough. I think we beat them 4. So it's going to be good. I mean, it's going to be really a good competition. So, but yeah, to be honest, I haven't really started prepping for that. I this year I'm really trying to go one match at a time. I can get ahead of myself real fast, so I'm just trying to stay in it and prepare for one thing at a time and try to keep our guys there too, so we're not looking too far ahead. Because I think with the schedule that we have and playing the high level opponents, it's easy to kind of take your mind it's hard for us to stay focused on that one at a time. It's easy for us to look at all these different things because there are a lot of teams that we're playing that are doing a lot of great things, so we're just really trying to focus one match at a time. So not quite there yet.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Chad, thanks so much for coming on. It's really awesome. Now Vernon's got some great stuff going on there, and looking forward to see how you guys do this season.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Definitely, if you guys want to have me on again, I would be down for sure. So
I'll tell you the same thing I told Lee. State
What's
champion.
That?
I told you, state champion comes back.
All right. It's incentive for sure.
Yeah, you got your challenge.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys.
All right, that was Chad from Mount Vernon. So now we'll get into our analysis section, which is again on a different day. So we've already seen all the Thursday matches and everything past that. So this should be pretty much exactly what our rankings are tomorrow. So first of all, last Friday, Moeller defeated Elder in 4. Interesting thing about that, they put in freshman Tyler Wong at libero. If you recall, Moeller's libero last year was Brandon Wong. He graduated. So now they have a freshman at libero, which is pretty cool because he's doing a great job. And their same backup MH2 who went in the St. X match seems to have continued to start over. What was interesting about that match is I think, I don't know if you were counting, but I counted at least 3 or 4 yellow cards handed out just for arguing calls with officials. And then Moeller defeated Carroll in 4. Patterson was injured, or at least on the bench in a jacket, so I assume he was injured. So hopefully that doesn't carry into tomorrow with the Elite Eight tournament, or tomorrow when this is uploaded for the Elite Eight tournament. Any thoughts on Moeller Elder?
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty much it's what you want to see out of a GCL battle, and I think for Elder, the interesting point from that one was just overall it was pretty competitive. It's what you expect out of a GCL game, but at the same time, we can see this team is recuperating in ways, and it's going to be the case when they face off against St. X on Friday, and then going into the Elite tournament, where we're really going to see Sean Tierney's side tested over these next few days and these next few games to see maybe they have a chance to become a state contender, but at the same time, we can see them in recuperation mode. They were able to sweep Davidson the day after that, but again, being swept on the road by Beaver Creek, which
Yeah.
granted, Beaver Creek is still a good team and they've looked like the best team in GWOC this year. At the same time, it just didn't seem like this team was into it, where you're losing like 25-14 in the first set. Final set, you lose 25-17. It just seems like this team's a little bit off in ways. They're getting better. And again, we talked to Coach Tierney last week about how they're dealing with injuries and graduations, but we can still see that this team is a work in progress.
Yeah, honestly, after their match with Moeller, I was fully ready to tell you, hey, I was wrong, and they've got, whatever they have in ball control makes up for their lack of offense. But I mean, man, a sweep to Beaver Creek, like that's had to get a lot, losing 25-14. Like, hey, if you go in and you lose one set and then you come back and win it, yeah, maybe. Or you lose at least more competitively. But Beaver Creek, after their sweep of Elder, they beat Baden in 5 and then swept Dakota West. St. X swept LaSalle. LaSalle kept it very competitive. Set 1 and 3 were both 25-23, so good on LaSalle. And then X at the Mount Vernon quad, like we're talking to Chad about, they beat Mount Vernon in 3 and St. Ed's in 3. They've only dropped one set on the year so far, and that was to St. Ignatius at the Berlin quad. Elder X will be Friday night before the Centerville Elite Eight tournament, so that'll be another big test if Elder can keep that one competitive, and if St. X can continue their streak of sweeps going here. St. Ignatius is swept Firestone and just now beat Jackson in 3 as well. So they're doing well, even though they're injured. Coach Dom gave me the injury report. They just had their right side break his hand, so he'll be out for about a month. And the setter that was injured at the Berlin quad, dislocated wrist, should be back for Hudson, which is April 5th. But I don't think he'll be back for the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it just seems like with what we've seen with many teams, Ignatius has just been dealing with injuries. It's just going to be interesting to see how they play with their setter out. Of course, they've struggled at times, right? They were down 2-1 against St. Ed's. They rally and win that game in 5. And again, St. Ed's has not looked that clean this year compared to how they've looked in years prior. So it'll be interesting to see how Ignatius looks going into the elite tournament this weekend. Again, I still think they're state favorites. I still think they're the best in the Northeast, and it'll be interesting to see what this team can do once they're back at full strength.
Yeah, really. If they get that win over Hudson, then they'll definitely be the favorites. They'd have beaten pretty much every competitive team there in the North. Just recently, Darby lost to Jerome in 5 sets. So Darby is no longer undefeated. I believe they're 6-1 now. So that's kind of a shame they're not going into the elite tournament undefeated, but that's their first league loss. So we'll see how they do. I don't know. Did that tarnish your opinion of them at all in comparison to St. Ignatius?
I think it kind of does. I mean, if you've been following for the last few episodes, you've heard me say that wait till Darby gets to the Centerville tournament. They have a chance to make themselves as a state contender and really rise up in our rankings and in many people's rankings. Now going into that game, even against an Ignatius side that hasn't looked 100%, I'm still questioning myself as to whether or not they can be state contenders. It feels like they need to win that game against Ignatius, not to really show that they're competitive to potentially hoist a trophy, but I think more so less, can they get back into the top 10? Can they truly show that they belong in the central region, especially with teams like Olentangy Liberty, like Mount Vernon, who have played better and actually in that regards have suffered more competitive losses than what we saw against Darby earlier today.
Yep, absolutely. Liberty, speaking of Liberty, they've been taking care of business with their league opponents. Let's see, they're running a 5-1 with Connor Severson now, which is very good. They made that change. I don't know why they didn't make that change last year, but they're doing it now, which is good. Ryan Severson, his brother, is dealing with a leg injury, but he was back as a DS. So I doubt that he'd be back playing front row on Saturday, but it's possible. And once that happens, they're going to be a much tougher team to deal with. Personally, I think that they're going to come out swinging and at least get in the top 4. They've just got a lot of firepower through the middle. And then Caden Whiteside is great defensively and offensively. Loveland is now 8-1. they were 8-0, and then they were reverse swept tonight by Walnut Hills. That's pretty cool. Reverse sweeps are always cool. They came back and they beat them pretty convincingly. I think set 4 was 25-12 and then 15-5 in the 5th set. So good on Walnut, really making a statement win heading into the Elite Eight tournament. Roger Bacon defeated McNicholas in 5. The Sales swept St. Edward and lost to Mount Vernon in 4 at that Mount Vernon quad. So I believe they're trying to reschedule their match with St. X that got canceled due to the power outage. So we'll see if that ends up happening again. The Sales won another CCL match, which is what their league, against St. Charles, which I think St. Charles is looking solid personally. I've added them into my top 10 because we keep accidentally putting D1 teams in D2, which, yeah, it's tough with the switch. I think they're definitely missing. The Sales is definitely missing their libero, Sammy Marchio from last year. I think their defense is suffering a little bit, but they've got a lot of height and a lot of firepower. So I don't see any team in D2 beating them as of right now. All right, let's get into our Centerville Elite Eight predictions.
Hey, Elder, on behalf of Centerville Athletic Program, Centerville Boys Program, we're excited to present you the 2022 First Place Champions Trophy of the Elite Eight Tournament. You have done your school, you have done your families, and you have done your community proud. Congratulations on being this year's champions of the Elite Eight Tournament.
So, but looking at my stuff, I still think, and I said this to start off the year, and I'll say it again, it feels like the state runs through the GCL, and I think it's going to happen in this entire tournament. I should preface, though, I should say this. I got the original seedings on Tuesday. This was from St. Xavier Volleyball. And then there was an update to the seedings yesterday. And essentially what both Centerville and St. X told us was the fact that basically they're just trying to figure out the rankings because there are no official state rankings this year. First, they went to Max Preps, but then they had some problems with theirs. Then they went to our rankings, but felt like they needed to change it up. So basically the rankings you see right now are basically every coach basically ranking all of the teams that are in this tournament, and that causes them to have their respective seeding. So nonetheless, I'll start off with round 1. In terms of seeding wise, I don't see any upsets occurring. I still see St. X beating Centerville in 3. The Bombers have just looked unstoppable this year for the most part. Ignatius over Darby in 5. I would still kind of sort of agree with that despite Darby's loss. It doesn't feel like Ignatius has been at 100%, but there's still a pretty strong squad nonetheless. Elder against Liberty. This is listed as the 3rd seed versus 6th seed. Again, in the original rankings, Olentangy Liberty was 4, Elder was 5. So again, you could argue the fact of who is the favorite, who's the underdog in this matchup. But I still think when it comes to a team like Olentangy Liberty, known for their offense, I think Elder almost counteracts it with a good defense. When you look at the guys and the personnel that they have on the ball, may not be the high attacking force that we saw from Mountie, Bianco, and Buskin, but definitely their back line really helps them out. It's going to be a close one on paper, but I think Elder's defense will help them beat Liberty in 5. And then the last one, Moeller will beat Walnut Hills in 3. I think Moeller will pretty much, for the most part, I think will make easy work of Walnut Hills. On to the semifinals, I still think St. X will keep the train moving and will almost replicate what happened in the Berlin quad. They'll beat Ignatius in 4. And then Moeller, again, I think Elder might be able to pull the victory against Liberty. I just don't think they can do it against Moeller. Give me the Crusaders to win in 3. On the other side of the losing bracket, I think Liberty will beat Walnut Hills in 3. Darby would beat Centerville in 4. It would be an interesting battle down the stretch, especially knowing that Centerville, especially in regular season games, loves to have that home field advantage. I know this will be a tournament, but I know from times where the Bombers have played at Centerville, it's almost common where you see the favorite drop a set in that type of environment. And then you look at the placement matches. I think St. X beats Moeller in 4 will set up an interesting rematch, at least what I think will be a rematch next Friday at the Brisbane Family Center. 3rd place, St. Ignatius will beat Elder in 5. Olentangy Liberty beats Darby in 4 for 5th place. And then I think Centerville does end up getting a victory as they beat Walnut Hills in 5.
Yeah. I think I did not deviate. I didn't deviate too much from what you said. I had X over Centerville in 3. I had Darby over Ignatius in 5. I think that'll be a very close one, but I think Darby will just barely sneak that one out. I had Liberty over Elder in 3. I think Liberty just has really strong and really efficient middles, especially attacking. And anytime Caden has a solo block, and oftentimes when he has a double block, it's going to be a kill. I just think Elder's probably going to lose through the middle. That's my guess. So I had Liberty going through in 3, and then Moeller in 3 over Walnut Hills. And then St. X over Darby, Moeller over Liberty, and then a classic St. X versus Moeller matchup. I think Moeller will do a little bit better and take a set off X in the final, but not quite enough to win the championship. So I think we both got X going all the way here. So then hopping over to our D1 state rankings for this week. Why don't you explain to me your rankings, any changes that you made?
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest change is just kicking Darby out of the top 10, mainly from what we saw from them earlier today as they lost to Jerome. That too, if I'm not mistaken, that was a home game for Darby as well.
It was, yes.
5. Yep. But Beaver Creek, they showed that they could really be competitive as well, especially in GWAC, especially in the Southwest, beating Elder on home turf in 3 sets. I think LaSalle still remains the same. And I give a little love to Walnut Hills as well with number 10. They have a little bit of an upside. The question for me with Walnut Hills is I don't expect them to beat Moeller. If they lose to Moeller, I don't think they get out of the top 10. But they're kind of teetering right now. And especially knowing from what we saw today, especially in those first 2 sets against Loveland, my biggest question for the Eagles is if they walk away from this tournament with no wins, do I put them out of the top 10 for next week? Because it feels like there's so many teams that could be in a spot. Firestone, for the most part, they were in the conversation last week. I don't know, after they lost to Hoban earlier this week. But you look at teams like Hudson, I mean, sure, they haven't played that strong of a schedule, but they're still doing really well right now. And sometimes that's what matters on the schedule and in the rankings. So I think for me, that one bubble team in terms of the top 10 has to be Walnut Hills, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we pretty much had the same idea coming into these rankings. Obviously, Beaver Creek got the head-to-head win over Elder. I think that's the only issue I take with the Elite 8 seedings that the coaches came up with. I know it. I don't know. It was all based off math, but if you have Elder as the 3 seed, then that would mean you would have Beaver Creek at number 3 in the state, and I just don't think that's right. And I don't think Liberty really deserves to be the 6th seed. So I don't know. I don't think that the seedings that they made were the best necessarily. Of course, I'm biased. I would like our seedings to be the seedings. I thought we had the best, but yeah, that's fair enough that they disagree. I think, yeah, LaSalle deserves to come back in, and then Walnut at 10. I put Berlin over LaSalle just because LaSalle has played very competitively and had some very competitive losses. They just haven't had really a competitive win yet. So I just gave Berlin the edge there, but that's pretty arbitrary. I would think, yeah, I completely agree with you. If Walnut Hills goes 0-3 and gets 8th place, then they're out. Darby would obviously come back in if they end up beating them or beating a team that beats them. And yeah, Centerville has an opportunity to peek into if, we've been underestimating them, or if maybe that Beaver Creek loss was just a fluke, and then they can come out and prove that they deserve to be in here. The great thing about the Centerville Elite 8 is it can all go chalk. It can all be upsets, and whatever happens, it's a great way to prove that you belong in the rankings, or you belong at number 1, or you belong in the top 5, anything like that. So yeah, it was really going to be a great tournament. Hopping over to D2, not too much to change from me. Obviously, we removed the Walsh Jesuit error. I had Fenwick going up to 5, Hoban drops down to 8, and then Carroll beat McNicholas in 4 earlier today, so they'll be at 6 and 7 respectively. And then I brought in St. Charles at 9. Any changes you made?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is what we've seen out of Carroll, in my opinion. You go to a rough Baden environment, you lose a close game in 5, and then you're playing Moeller the next day. Again, they don't walk away with this with a win, but at the same time, it shows me that Carroll seems competitive at times, and they're just like I think, just one or two blatant mistakes away from really pulling some upsets. And I think at the D2 level, especially when you look at who's making it out of the Southwest region, they have a really good chance of being that team in the Southwest. It just feels like they're missing that one piece overall. I think the one other thing that really peaked with me was Hoban in general. And I think that win over Firestone in 5 helped me put them from 5 to 4 in my rankings. I think when you look at the bottom, and I was talking to you about this earlier, it just feels like there's an interesting balance in D2, and just the ability that both of us have is deciding, do you put a team in because they have competitive losses, despite maybe not getting a competitive win, or do you take a team that has those wins, but at the same time hasn't really faced anybody that potent? And I think it's just that kind of being in limbo of the two that kind of leaves teams like Alter and CJ at 9 and 10, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, if you talk about college football polls, there are people who believe that if you're undefeated, then you have to be only below undefeated teams. And I think that's just the dumbest philosophy ever. If there's a little league team that's undefeated, doesn't mean they're better than an MLB team that's not undefeated. So I think that strength of schedule is absolutely very important. And I'd rather see a team be 3-3 with 3 competitive losses and 3 competitive wins than 0-6 with 0 competitive wins. So that's just my personal philosophy, and that's how I do rankings. I think you agree with that as well. And that's probably why we haven't seen teams like Hudson and Firestone and Loveland get into the top 10 in D1, because even if you're undefeated, if you're not playing anyone that's anywhere close to the top 10, in my mind, those wins don't mean the same. All right, that was Ohio Volley Talk. Mahir, any final thoughts?
I'm just really excited for the Centerville Elite Tournament. It just feels like what we're going to see from this tournament this weekend will decide what we'll put in our rankings for next week. And we'll kind of set the tone as to who's in the driving wheel, who's in the middle, and who's in the back when it comes to state contention.
Yep, very big week here. The results of this tournament are going to have huge implications for the state rankings for the rest of the tournament. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next week.